Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie. As you can see, I'm not at home. This isn't my layout. I'm down on the south coast of England visiting McKinley Railway owned by David Townend. This layout is somewhat bigger than mine, let's say. As you can see, this is quite a substantial layout, but what you see here is also duplicated just over the other side of this back scene area. The layout's got several stations. There's one called London, which kind of looks a little bit like Paddington. Just over the other side of here, there's a Birmingham. Over here, there's a Manchester. None of these stations actually look like the real thing. They're not supposed to be prototypical, but Paddington does have a kind of a London look about it. So they're not supposed to look like the real thing. They're just supposed to be good, workable destinations on which to fire your trains off. The very interesting aspect of this layout is it's not just a case of pressing a few buttons and watching your trains go by. David has invested heavily in Train Controller Gold, which does a great deal of automation, but what you have the advantage of doing here is you need several members, but if you've got a guy running Paddington, then he may well choose to send a train to Manchester. The guy in Manchester knows it's going to come. He has to prepare a platform to receive the train. The coaching stock will move back onto the platform. The shunter will come off. The express loco will go onto the front of the coaching stock, and then when the time comes, let's say it's a 6:15 to Manchester or whatever. There's a few buttons to be pressed, and spot on the time code of 6:15 on Train Controller, that train will make its way up to Manchester. And the layout itself, there's a great deal of hidden track underneath these baseboards, so the journey is quite considerable. When the train runs into Manchester, then you need another shunter to get either the coaching stock out or another locomotive to go on to the coaching stock. You need to get the loco that brought it from Paddington out of the platform. You need to get it to the loco shed. You need to get it refueled, rewatered, and then laid up in the shed. And then the next locomotive may well take it off to Birmingham or whatever. And it's the way that all this works together, not necessarily on a strict timetable, but it's a timetable which keeps all the other operators busy and on their toes. So there's a little bit of stress involved. So you can send trains through to stations, and there may be goods trains, there might be milk trains, there might be freight liners or car trains, and all this kind of thing that you send on. The layout was started back in, excuse me while I refer to my notes, was started back in 2001 in this room, which measures around about 25 feet long and kind of about 18-20 feet across. There's a little fiddle yard outside which I'll show you. And it became operational in 2005, but was completely finished with all the scenics in 2008. And in that time, I mean, I've come down and ran on this layout. It's a Digitrax layout with Train Controller, and the whole thing works together marvellously. We have all these boards up behind you, show you which way the points are facing and all this kind of stuff. And it really is a good high-tech, interesting layout, which really relies on the team of operators to make it work. David, however, wasn't quite content with that, so it's taken a stage further because the fiddle yard to support this wasn't big enough. If we move outside, I'll show you where we are now. So here we are in what is basically the bedroom next door, and the fiddle yard is extended from the railway room out here on 2 levels, and it holds all the trains. And this is the kind of thing that supports the main layout. But what was found was that this layout, this fiddle yard, was nowhere near big enough to support the amount of trains that David wanted to make the best of McKinley Railway. So to cope with the expansion of McKinley, David wanted a much bigger fiddle yard, and it was known as Hades, named after the Greek god, I think, of the dead, i.e. you'd put your dead locos in a fiddle yard until they're required. And David then worked out that he needed the storage space in his fiddle yard of 180 locomotives, because the concept changed. Rather than just kind of not a glorified train set, but a working model railway, he changed the kind of definition that it would be a time machine running from 1956 through to 1975. So you go from BR steam right through to the pre-tops, or just going into the tops era of blue diesels. And then you would run these trains in order. So you'd start off with your old kind of blood and custard, then onto your chocolate and cream coaches, then you might be in your crimson liveries, and then into your blue greys, and then eventually ending up at an HST unit. And that's how the passage of time, which is the whole concept of how the time machine that it's known as works. But on top of that, it was made more complicated, because on top of all these 4-tier fiddle yards, and each fiddle yard I think has got 5 tracks on it, and there's a big helix over the other side, the plan changed again then, just to make things harder. So he's now installing stations in this room, and I think the stations are, there's definitely a Sheffield, there's a Halifax, and I'm sure there's 1 or 2 that I can't remember, but there's a great big scenic side to go here. This was started, the concept was created in 2014, and the build started in 2015, and it should be finished with scenery around about 2022. It's clearly a long way off, but there's clearly a great deal left to do. So besides being a good friend of David, what brings me to McKinley? Well, it's all to do with David's YouTube channel. Sadly, last year, I think it was in May-June time, his videographer Brian died of cancer, and obviously it was terribly sad, but his channel just kind of dried up, and asked me to come down and have a look at the videos that Brian had shot, but hadn't quite got around to publishing. So over the last 4 days I've been here and working through those videos and trying to get them out, and in that time we've also brought some more up-to-date videos, which we will then publish sort of 1 every 2 weeks over the next, must be the next 8 weeks before we catch up with where we are. The first 6 videos were shot by Brian. I've just done a little bit of editing and tidying up to get them online. And please don't forget to go to McKinley Railway and subscribe. It's not necessarily the kind of how-to type environment that I do, but it just shows you a huge concept that if you've got the imagination and the time and the team behind you to build something of this scale, it can be enormously satisfying to fulfill your dreams. So I think that's quite enough of me droning on. Let's take a look at some trains. So there we go, that's a quick tour around McKinley, and this is David, the proud owner of it.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Have you enjoyed having me here?
It's been an absolute privilege and you fitted in fantastically. Well done you.
Thank you. It's been a real blast, and a layout of this size and this magnitude is really down to a couple of things. The first thing is your imagination, the next thing is your space available, but more importantly, I think it's the team behind you.
More it is, that's the most important
Indeed,
thing.
yeah.
So welcome
indeed.
aboard, Charlie.
Thank you very much.
You're crucial.
Anyway guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.